In the first part of our NBA preview two-part series, we went over the Western Conference and separated the teams in the conference into different rankings and tiers based on how I believe they will do this season and the expectations they have. And now it's time for part two with the Eastern Conference. So really not much of an introduction is needed. We're going to be previewing the Eastern Conference today for the 2022-23 NBA season. So without further ado, let's get into it. The first team we will be talking about are the Orlando Magic. Now, I like the Magic's roster a lot, but this team is just so young, and there's a lot of good teams and talented teams in this Eastern Conference. I just don't think it's likely they win a lot of games this year. I think next year is probably the year you see them start to be competitive, but obviously they picked Paolo Banchero number 1 overall, which I thought was a good pick, and they need that number 1 scoring option to fit their young core badly, and he can be that guy. Now they have Cole Anthony in year 3, who's a streaky scoring guard who's shown some real potential at times, but needs to be more consistent and needs to take those next steps as a playmaker. They also have Jalen Suggs, their very high first-round pick from the prior year, entering year 2, who has a lot of defensive tools, but there are questions about his offensive game. His handle and shooting are questionable, but I do think he can turn into a good complementary guard alongside someone with good playmaking and can find his teammates with looks as well as create his own shot. And there's a question to whether Cole Anthony can be that guy around Suggs, or can Suggs be that guy next to Cole Anthony. Both young guards have a lot of questions going into this season. Then you have Franz Wagner, very versatile wing, was definitely the better rookie compared to Jalen Suggs, and he is definitely a piece for the future in this Magic young core. Was one of the best rookies in the league last year. You also have Wendell Carter Jr., who has developed an outside game, and he's a good young center. If he can stay healthy, I think he's a very good player. As well as Mo Bamba, who made some improvements. They surprisingly brought him back, and I like Mo Bamba. I think he's a good young backup big with also some shooting ability. And the Magic definitely have a lot to look forward to in this young core. But really what fascinates me, what's going to determine their season, are the questions about their 2 young guards, Suggs and Anthony. There's also questions about if Jonathan Isaac will ever come back. He's been out now 2 years with that torn ACL he suffered in the NBA bubble. So overall, can't see this team win a lot of games. But if they can get consistent guard play in the future, there's no doubt in my mind this Magic team can be a problem. These next 3 teams are in a similar group to the Magic, but I could see them being a bit better. And those are the Charlotte Hornets, Indiana Pacers, and Detroit Pistons. Now the Hornets, obviously you have Lamelo Ball. Terry Rozier is a good complementary player to Ball as well. Gordon Hayward is good but very injury prone, and they did lose Miles Bridges as well, or it's unclear at least what his situation is going to be moving forward with his legal issues. Montrezl Harrell they also lost. I don't think that was a huge loss, but that is a player they lost, and they brought in Mark Williams in the draft. Now I think Williams is good, but I don't know if you can count on a rookie if you are trying to really make a push for the playoffs. They are also going to need a jump from James Bouknight in year 2, who didn't play much in year 1, and I'd expect him to get more game time. Really interested to see what he does within his second year at a UConn. And this team is overall very mid, besides LaMelo Ball. They have some young guys that are really going to need to step up. Kai Jones is another one, another first-round pick last year that didn't play much, that they're going to need to step in and fill a role this year in Charlotte. But overall, I don't have too high expectations for them. I'd say they win like 35 games, anywhere from 30 to 38, I'd guess. The next team on this list is the Indiana Pacers. Now, the Pacers might be a tier above if they ended up getting DeAndre Ayton this offseason, but they weren't able to get him, as the Suns did match their offer sheet. But still, this team has a very solid roster. They have Tyrese Halliburton and Chris Duarte, which is a very nice backcourt for the future, even though Duarte, he's like 25, but he's still a player for the future with the team. They also acquired Jalen Smith mid-season last year, and he turned into a solid player, and they were able to bring him back, and I think he could be a solid young player for them. They have some vets like Buddy Hield and Miles Turner who have been rumored with moves to the Lakers. If that is true and they take Westbrook on in a salary dump, my expectations for them would definitely lower. But as of right now, with Westbrook still on the Lakers and Miles Turner and Buddy Hield on the Pacers still, I think this is a decent team overall, and they could make a run at the play-in. I just think they don't have the same top-end talent some teams have, but definitely a solid team for the future. They also took Ben Mathurin in the draft, and they've had a promising start to their rebuild, their new era, post-Domantas Sabonis in Indiana. But it will be interesting to see how long this rebuilding phase lasts, if they have patience, or if they go back to their ways of trying to win, as the Pacers aren't really known as a franchise that likes to tank or lose games on purpose for future draft picks. They want results now for their fans, especially in a small market. Speaking of teams with nice cores, the final team in the second tier is the Detroit Pistons, who were one of the worst teams in basketball 2 years ago, and a year ago weren't very good either. They have Cade Cunningham, they have Jaden Ivey, they have Jalen Duren, as well as guys like Isaiah Stewart and Hamidou Diallo. And who knows, maybe we see something in year 3 from Killian Hayes. But even though they lost Jeremy Grant, I still believe in this team being able to make an improvement. I think Saddiq Bey will continue to be a good player. I think Cade Cunningham in year 2 is just going to explode. I think Jaden Ivey is going to be really fun to watch. He'll have some good moments. He'll obviously struggle at times as a rookie. And overall, they also added Alec Burks and Nerlens Noel, 2 solid plug-and-play veterans to this team. They also added Kevin Knox, who isn't great, but he does add some shooting to the team. Overall, though, if this team's going to go anywhere, it lies on the shoulders of Cade Cunningham, and I happen to be an avid believer in his ability. So I think the Pistons will be in the mix for the play-in, but I would expect them to narrowly miss out. Now, in the next tier of teams, we have the teams that I do expect to make the play-in, and those are the Washington Wizards and New York Knicks. Now, as for the Wizards, this offseason they drafted Johnny Davis, they re-signed Bradley Beal, and they acquired Monte Morris in a trade with the Denver Nuggets, as well as Will Barton. This team, I think the offensive talent in a core of Kuzma, Porzingis, and Beal is decent enough to get them to the play-in, and I think their young wings are decent as well. I think Rui Hachimura is a good player. I think Denny Avdia is very good on the defensive end. There's a lot of questions about him on the offensive end. And hopefully for them, Corey Kispert can do a little more in year 2. Didn't have a great rookie year coming out of Gonzaga. And as for the rest of the team, they really got to hope Porzingis can stay healthy, and Monte Morris gives them really good point guard play. Morris is very solid. I don't think he's a long-term option as a really good starting point guard. He's all right as a starter. He's a really good backup. But if Beal and Porzingis stay healthy, I see this team scrapping into the play-in. 2 very offensively talented players, and Kyle Kuzma coming off a very good year as well. As for my Knicks, they could have been higher, obviously, if a Donovan Mitchell deal was completed, which looked very close to being finalized. But the Cavs obviously ended up acquiring him. And I think this is a solid young team. They got Jalen Brunson in the offseason, which was their big addition. And even if it may be an overpay slightly, they finally have a competent good point guard in New York, it looks like. And as for the rest of this team, it's a good young team. I think this team has some pretty good depth, but there isn't really any star power on this Knicks team. But as for the young guys, RJ Barrett, they need a big year 4 out of him. Mitchell Robinson got to stay healthy and stay in good shape. Obi Toppin is going to be really interesting to see if he gets more of an opportunity. Really came on at the end of last year. And that leads us to the biggest talking point for this Knicks team. Can Julius Randle bounce back? And that's what I really think this season is going to hinge on. Really what the situation is going to be at the 4 position. Because even if Randle doesn't bounce back, if Obi can fill his shoes and even do more than Randle or fill a different role, they're different players. But if Obi can be that guy at the 4, even if Randle isn't, this team could still have a good season if Julius Randle struggles. You also have other young guys like Quentin Grimes. Cam Reddish probably won't be in the rotation on opening nights, but hopefully he gets an opportunity. They signed Isaiah Hartenstein, who's a very good backup big. And you also have Emmanuel Quickley. This is a good young core they have, but they're kind of stuck in the middle in terms of the roster right now. But they do have a lot of young pieces and picks for the future. I think this is going to be a solid year for the Knicks. Also a really big year for Tom Thibodeau in year 3 with the franchise. Moving on, these next 3 teams I definitely think are playoff level teams. And those are the Toronto Raptors, Atlanta Hawks, and Chicago Bulls. And starting with the Bulls, last year at a certain point they looked really good and maybe like they could pose somewhat of a threat at least in the Eastern Conference, but they were bounced out in the first round by Giannis Antetokounmpo and the Milwaukee Bucks. But this team has offensive talent, obviously, with DeMar DeRozan, who I think probably will take a bit of a step back. He is getting pretty old, and he's coming off a really late peak in his career, a really late career year for him, and I think it's inevitable he, in at least some capacity, declines. But Zach LaVine is obviously a really good scorer. Nikola Vucevic is a good offensive player in a good stretch 5. And this team is really hoping that they will be getting Lonzo Ball back at some point in the year, who they really missed after he went down, as well as Alex Caruso, 2 very good defensive guards that are clearly very important to this team, as well as getting hopefully a healthy season from Patrick Williams in his 3rd year out of Florida State. It's a really big year for the former 4th overall pick, who is yet to show really the signs the Bulls would like to see, but everybody knows the upside is there. In terms of offseason moves, they had a pretty quiet offseason. They made much more of a splash in the previous one, and in this offseason they added 2 solid veterans who used to be really good and now are just decent players in Goran Dragic and Andre Drummond, both former Nets. And I think they will add some good depth to this team, as I don't think Tristan Thompson was a very good backup big for Chicago. And overall, I expect this team to have a solid year, but there's just so much talent in the East. I think DeMar DeRozan is going to inevitably, decline a bit. He's still a really good player, but it's going to be nearly impossible for him to top his season last year. And without that level of production, the team may fall off, but the defense definitely will be better with the return of Lonzo, Alex Caruso, and Patrick Williams. Bulls, though, by no means a bad team, just a lot of talent in this East and really in the NBA at this current state, which I have to just continue to reiterate in this video. If you don't see your team higher, it's very well not because I think they're bad, just because other teams, I believe, are better. And in this tier, the second team we have are the Atlanta Hawks, who 2 years ago came onto the scene in the playoffs. Trae Young took that team to the conference finals, and they were a trendy pick to go all the way the next year, or again make a big jump in terms of their regular season numbers, but it really didn't happen. They barely made the playoffs. They beat the Cavs in the play-in, and they were the 8th seed, and they struggled against Miami. Trae Young had a really bad series coming off a great playoff debut, and with a change needed for the Hawks, they most definitely made that this offseason. Trading for DeJounte Murray, they gave up a lot along with Danilo Gallinari, multiple first-round picks in that package to the San Antonio Spurs, but you put one of the best defensive guards in basketball now next to Trae Young. Now, the offensive fit will definitely be interesting, but they got one of the best defenders in the game and a good offensive player himself, and an all-star last year to pair with Trae Young in that backcourt. They also drafted A.J. Griffin, who, if he can stay healthy, I think down the line could be a really nice wing shooter for the Hawks. They also traded Kevin Huerter, a fan favorite. I definitely do think they got better, though. And overall, if this team can stay healthy, I don't think anybody would want to be matched up with this squad, with a starting lineup right now looking like Trae Young, John Collins, DeAndre Hunter, DeJounte Murray, and Clint Capella. And then off the bench, you have some pieces like Onyeka Okongwu, Bogdan Bogdanovic, Aaron Holiday. They also added Frank Kaminsky, A.J. Griffin. Obviously, there's some work to be done with the depth on this team, but there definitely is top-end talent on this squad. DeJounte Murray and DeAndre Hunter defending on the wings is really, really elite. They're going to be a very interesting team to watch. I think they have one of the highest ceilings and lowest floors of the teams in the East. Now, a team that is the exact opposite to me is the Toronto Raptors. I think they have a pretty high floor just because how good their coach is, and they have two very solid lower-end all-star type of players in Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam, as well as Scottie Barnes, who obviously is the X factor for this team, entering his second year in the league, the reigning Rookie of the Year. I think if he can make a jump as a scorer, we know how good he is as a rebounder, and if he can expand his playmaking even more, because it's already impressive for his age and size, I think the Raptors could be in for another playoff appearance, most definitely in the middle of the Eastern Conference as they were last year. They had a pretty quiet offseason. Their biggest move was adding either Christian Coloco in the draft in the second round or signing Otto Porter Jr., but a starting lineup of Fred VanVleet, Gary Trent, OG Anunoby, Scottie Barnes, and Pascal Siakam definitely has quality. And Nick Nurse is one of the best coaches in the league. It's that simple. They're also just a great organization, and they will get the most out of their players. Now, in the next tier of teams, here are three teams that all have, pretty experienced rosters and a lot of talent on them, and have been a finals pick by some people, all three of these teams, but have some aging stars on their team and have questions with health. But if everything goes right, I do think the 76ers, the Brooklyn Nets, and the Miami Heat all have the potential to go to the NBA Finals. But a lot of that, is relying on the stars on these teams being able to stay healthy. Now, if we start with the Miami Heat, who made the finals in 2020 in the bubble, they made the conference finals last year. They had a very good season. They're a great organization. They have a great coach. Their players are always in really good condition, and they have a very good defense. But there are some questions, about the star power on this team, especially, with Jimmy Butler, in the regular season, he doesn't shoot threes. They need more scoring punch. And Butler has had, some nagging injuries in his career as well. Tyler Hero is in the final year of his deal. Will be interesting to see what they do with him. You have Kyle Lowry in year 2 in Miami. He's getting older, and it's going to be really interesting to see how this team finds scoring when it isn't coming from Jimmy Butler or Tyler Hero. You have Max Strus, who came on last year. He can get hot at times. Kind of took Duncan Robinson's spot. And you have Bam Adebayo, who's one of the best defenders in the world. Definitely a top 3 defender at his position. Probably, I'd say, second behind Rudy Gobert. But this team, once again, will be good defensively. I just have a question of the point guard position and really where the scoring is going to come from when Butler and Hero can't give it to you. As for the Philadelphia 76ers, they traded for James Harden at the deadline last year, and they lost in the second round. Tyrese Maxey had a great year too, and Joel Embiid had an amazing season. But once again, they fell short in the playoffs. And now for Harden's first full season in Philly, they have the roster to compete. They added PJ Tucker as well as Daniel House and some other veterans. They have a very nice roster. But the real question is, come playoff time, will Joel Embiid be healthy? And will James Harden show up, as well as Tobias Harris, but mainly James Harden because he is the focal point of this team. It's really lying on his shoulders, but he has a chance to take this team all the way in Philly. And as for the Brooklyn Nets, they had a wild offseason, but at the end of it all, it looks like KD and Kyrie will still be here. The talent on this team, especially the top-end talent this team has, is undeniable. But there are questions as to KD and Kyrie's health. Kyrie's always a question in terms of, is he even going to be available? And even when both were available, they really struggled last year in the playoffs. And, they added TJ Warren. But the big thing is Ben Simmons is hopefully going to be back for them. And he's one of the better perimeter defenders in all of the league. I think he could really help this team. And if everything goes right, I feel like some people have written off the Nets. Like, the Nets could easily go all the way and win it all. But there's just so many questions with this team, as well as a question if Steve Nash is this team's coach of the future. Is he the guy to take them all the way? Undeniable talent for the Brooklyn Nets. Just a lot of questions when it comes to egos and injuries on that team. Now for the top two teams in the Eastern Conference. And I think, no doubt, the two favorites in the East are the Celtics and Bucks. Now, as for the Celtics in the past few days, it's gotten a bit murkier with the Ime Udoka situation. But nonetheless, these guys are the reigning Eastern Conference champions. They have a great defense, two of the best two-way players in the league in Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum, as well as the reigning Defensive Player of the Year in Marcus Smart, and an absolute defensive weapon in Robert Williams in the middle, as well as Al Horford, who's very good on that end, and Derek White. And this offseason, they added Malcolm Brogdon and Danilo Gallinari, even though he will be hurt and missing a lot of time. I think Brogdon is a really, really nice addition to this team because he adds more playmaking and scoring and pure point guard play. Even, how good Marcus Smart is on the defensive end. He's a bit streaky on offense, and that is something they lacked, and we saw that in the finals. So I think if Brogdon's healthy, he can really bring that. And this team has all the talent to go right back to the finals. But the coaching situation and how that affects the team will be definitely something to keep your eyes on. Now for the team that I think will come out of the East this season. The number one seed, I believe, will be the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, 2 years ago, they were Eastern Conference and NBA champions as they went on to defeat the Phoenix Suns in the finals. And last year, they had what seemed like a good chance to go right back to the finals, but a Khris Middleton injury really derailed their chances in the playoffs. And they still, had a decent chance with Giannis and Drew Holiday and a good cast of role players, but they did come up short to the Boston Celtics. And now this year with a healthy team, I really think they have the best player in the league, in my opinion. With Khris Middleton healthy, Drew Holiday ready for another very good season as a two-way player, and guys like Bobby Portis on your team, Pat Connaughton, just a number of very good role players who know their role around Giannis. I think the Bucks are the team to beat this year in the East, and I have them going all the way to the finals, and I very much could see Giannis taking home his third MVP. These past few years, he's had a case himself for 3 and 4 already, but I do think voter fatigue does play into that. But this year, the Bucks are locked and loaded, I feel. I also think Joe Ingles was a nice addition, and they're the team to beat for me. Before we get to the standings predictions, though, there's one team in the East I have not talked about. And these guys are a wild card to me. The Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, the Cavaliers traded for Donovan Mitchell seemingly out of nowhere when it seemed like the New York Knicks were going to be his destination. One way or another, it seemed like he was going to be a Knick before training camp started. But the Cavs swooped in and made a deal for him, giving up a lot of their future, Ochai Agbaji, their lottery pick, as well as a bunch of picks down the line. But I think it was worth it. I think the Cleveland Cavaliers have one of the most talented young rosters in basketball. And now let's talk about this squad. Obviously, you have Donovan Mitchell. You also have Darius Garland, who was a first-time All-Star last season. One of the best young guards in basketball, no doubt about it. You have Evan Mobley, who had a very strong Rookie of the Year case, and is just an absolute freak. 7'1", extremely switchable, can handle and pass the ball, and has shooting potential as well. He's going to be scary on the defensive end. And then you pair him up with Jarrett Allen, who was also an All-Star last year. And then you have Kevin Love, who will likely come off the bench, who had a really nice resurgence last year in Cleveland. You also have Isaac Okoro, a very good young wing defender, who you put alongside Garland and Donovan Mitchell, and he can help make up for, their defensive shortcomings, and those two can really help make up for Okoro's clear offensive shortcomings, as Garland and Mitchell are two of the best offensive guards in basketball, as well as guys like Ricky Rubio, who was good for the Cavs before he got hurt and traded. Now he's back in Cleveland, as well as Karis LeVert. There's a good band of role players alongside Garland and Mitchell, and just guys who have different skill sets and bring something new to the table. And I think this team has a really high ceiling, not only this year but for the future. And they're a team that I would put above the tier of the Raptors, Bulls, and Hawks. But I haven't seen enough of them, to group them with those Nets, 76ers, and Heat, as those teams all have very proven players and overall are filled with much more vets on their squad. But I do really like the Cavs, and they're the one team that are a complete wild card to me this year. They have a very high ceiling. I don't think their floor is particularly low, but if everything goes right, I could see them being a sneaky finals contender in the East. Now for my official Eastern Conference standing predictions. Now, last place I have the Orlando Magic, but that very well could change if Lamelo Ball does miss a lot of time for the Hornets, because that roster really isn't good without him or Miles Bridges. The Pacers 14, Magic 15 right now, Pistons 12. They could make a run at the play-in, but I don't think right now they're as good as the Knicks or Wizards, but they will be. Knicks at 10, Bulls at 9, and then Raptors, Hawks, and Nets 8-6. And then the Cavs in the 5 seed, I could see them higher, I could see them lower. A team I really could see higher if everything goes right is the Nets, but they just constantly have injury issues. I don't know if Steve Nash is the right coach for them. Just a lot of question marks, but that's one of the top 3 most talented teams in this conference, I think. I think the Sixers will be really good in the regular season at least. We'll see if Embiid can hold up for the playoffs. Celtics will be very good. Might have ranked them a bit higher if Gallinari didn't get hurt and if Ime Udoka was still here. Don't really know what to expect with him missing the whole season. And number 1, I have Giannis in the Bucks. Those are my predictions. This is my Eastern Conference preview. I thank y'all for watching. Peace out.